You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 975. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we cover everything private practice. We cover clinical issues, we cover business issues. We want you to have a thriving practice you absolutely love. We want it to thrive and be great and making you money, being fulfilling, but we want you to love it. We want you to love the clients you work with. We want to have you feel like it's just what you need for your community. I mean, this is the show that I wish I had when I started my private practice back in 2006. Actually, when I started this podcast, it really was to selfishly just interview people I had no business talking to. And, that's one of the great things about a podcast is you can talk to people way out of your league. And today I get to do that. I'm hanging out with Dr. Julia Digangi, who is a neuroscientist, a neuropsychologist, and expert on the connection between the brain, leadership, and emotion. Her lab and clinical work have been conducted at Harvard, Columbia, Georgetown, University of Chicago, and more. She's worked with leaders at the White House Press Office, global companies, international NGOs, and U.S. Special Forces. Her book, Energy Rising, is published by Harvard Business Review Press and was released in September of 2023. Julia, welcome to the Practice podcast.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love talking to authors and people that are doing this kind of work. I know how hard it can be to write a book, promote a book, even just thinking through all the things that are in your brain and saying, how do I put this into a book? Take me back, as you were thinking about Energy Rising, how did that kind of all come together into something that you thought, like, this needs to be a book?
Okay, that's a great question. So I will say, as you know, I'm a neuropsychologist, and I had I worked in academia for many years. I'm really well published in the scientific literature. So all my writing had been kind of in scientific journals. Now, I would sometimes get approached by like people that wanted to do a documentary on trauma, or one time I was asked to be the psychological expert on a Netflix reality show. Like, I could not say no fast enough. I like to say I'm a Midwest academic who likes to go to 2 good parties a year, and then I spend the rest of my time in my office doing my research, treating my patients, and helping my clients. So I never thought that I would write a book on this scale, on this sort of stage. Out of the blue, actually, Harvard Business Review approached me during the pandemic, and they said, "Would you be willing to write on effectively leadership and emotion?" And I had spent a lot of my career at this point in trauma. I had spent a lot of my career serving many of the world's most vulnerable communities. And what I had realized, and I also worked in US politics, I worked on presidential campaigns, I worked at the White House. What had really come through for me at this point, and I think this is such an important piece of the puzzle, is that until the most powerful people change, the world's never going to change. So until, for example, and this happens in our relationship, when we're the child and our parents are certainly the more powerful actors, until they change, what kind of hope do we have, right? So when Harvard Business Review approached me, and they're speaking to many of the world's most powerful leaders, and I had this opportunity to really engage with them on these subjects of emotional pain and emotional power, I said I'm all in. And it has been the most extraordinary, life-giving. I get messages, I just got a message it brings almost tears to my eyes. I got a message from someone yesterday on LinkedIn that said, this book literally saved my life.
Mm.
So to be able to have this platform, I feel so grateful to be able to talk about human pain and human power in a way that's both moving and scientific has been one of the greatest journeys of my life.
Yeah. And I know with Thursday is the new Friday, we really dive into the 4-day work week, and to hear people, pulling things from that for their teams or for their companies, and even individual solopreneurs. There's something about once that book is out in the world, how, my kids are still at home, but how I imagine, as I even see my 12-year-old turn more and more into like her own little person, you know,
Totally.
she's going to launch into the world, and it's like, I'm gonna be there to support her, but, like, she's gonna become something that isn't really reflective of me at some point. And not that your kids always are reflective of you, but, just that idea that, you've written the book, that's your responsibility, but where it goes after you're done, it's like, it's out in the world, and, like, you don't know that impact that it's gonna have.
Oh my God, such a wise, wise insight. And it's funny, right? So we all know, and certainly the neuropsychologist in me, I'm very aware that we can intellectually understand something and then have a very different emotional process about it. So
Yes.
I kind of knew, like, as launch day, because launch day really just happened. It was just, in September, and you launched the book, and then I was doing all this media. So I still feel like I'm very much in the thick of it. But as I was getting closer and closer to launch day, I was like, emailing my editor, like, I need to change the word on page 197 immediately. And finally, he's like, really gave me this wise advice. He was like, you are never going to feel like it's done.
Yeah.
It's done.
I I recently looked something up, and in, the index at the back, they misspelled something. I was like, "What? How did that get through?" But it's like
Yeah,
2 years after the book launched, and it's like, I it is what it is at this point, unless I'm gonna
it is
do
what
a
it is.
revised
Exactly.
edition. Now, I know we're going to talk kind of neuroscience, and the expertise that you talk about in the book, but I love hearing from people that go from kind of one field to the masses, to like go from highly scientific and consulting and all these different areas, to then you're writing this book. What did it look like for you to do that media tour? Like, were you doing podcasts? Did you have like a PR agent? Like what? Like, how did you kind of spend those marketing dollars to get in front of people?
Well, I will say, uh, as an academic, it's not an exaggeration to say we will prepare for 10 years to give, a 20-minute presentation at a conference, right? If you really think
Hmm.
about our dissertations and how much analysis we do and how well we know our data set. So when the book launched, I really had no idea, again, to go back to your analogy of like putting your child into the world, I didn't know how it was gonna be received, and the reception has really been extraordinary. I mean, the number of things I'm being invited to, the number of podcasts I've done. So at first, to be totally honest with you, it was too much for my nervous system. I was like, "I'm sorry,
Mm.
I'm going to need 176 hours to prepare for this 20-minute conversation." And what became very apparent was, like, either I was going to have to, because to your point, like, I have 2 little kids. I have patients. I do a lot of consulting and leadership work. I was like, there are not enough hours in the day for me to now basically over prepare and try to over function through this media tour. So I was like, I often say, we are called to walk the work. So I just wrote this entire book on emotional power that was getting so much traction. It was exciting people so much. And I was like, I have got to, like, have the integrity to live this thing. So my first podcast, to be really blunt, I was extremely anxious. Like, I didn't have my PowerPoint deck and I didn't have all these
Mhm.
hours of preparation. But the piece that is so important, and I actually talked about this in Energy Rising. I give this exercise I call Hold Your Emotional Shake. We know that if we're willing to meet a reasonable degree of anxiety and fear and stress, the nervous system habituates the same way our muscles get stronger. And so what started to happen to me very quickly was not only did my anxiety subside, but my confidence grew, my willingness to connect with people, right? Cuz how can we connect with people when we're just like afraid that we're going to have some kind of catastrophe and humiliate ourselves. So, and I think the more I was kind of just willing to be human and admit my own nervousness, it's really been amazing. And then some incredible things I never could have imagined just naturally happened. One of the big things that happened that really still shocks me is I wrote the New Year's essay in the Wall Street Journal about these
Mm.
ideas of emotional power. Like, what does it mean to be a high achiever? And a lot of times when we're high achieving, we do too much, we think too much, we give too much, we function too much. So, how do we think about holding our power in a way that actually feels good to us? So, it was a long answer,
How do
but
you get a writing assignment like that? Was that a PR person? Did somebody know you there? Like how does that even
no, that
how do you
was
even get that?
so this is what I want to tell people. So, okay, I love that I've done a lot of podcasts. No one's taken it in this direction. So let me tell you actually how this whole thing with HBR happened. I didn't have anything. Like I didn't have an agent. I didn't even know I didn't have a book proposal. I didn't even honest to God, I did not even think I would ever write a book, like a crossover popular press book. So everyone was quarantined in their home during the pandemic, imagining themselves as William Faulkner. So I was like, okay, I have this article I want to write for HBR. I know a lot about anxiety. People were now just starting to talk about return to work. So I literally wrote an article. I probably spent, 3 or 4 hours on it and was like totally prepared for it to be just a waste of labor. I just submitted the article to like info at, just like
Yeah.
shoving it into the vortex. And they said, actually, we really like the article. We're going to run it. So my point here is like, I think a lot of times we think like we don't have the machinery or we don't have the credibility or we don't have the chops. It's like, if you really believe in your work, like you have a genuine energy for it and you have something powerful to say that's going to help people, I think that's a pretty unstoppable force. The same thing happened with the Wall Street Journal. I just wrote the piece and
Wow.
they said we like it.
So I just want to pause right there. So there's a whole chapter in Thursday is the New Friday when we're looking at the 3 internal inclinations that science shows us makes entrepreneurs more successful. And it's just based on not pass fail, but just like, what's your natural inclination? Do you have it or don't you? Do you need to work on it? And one of them is the ability to move on it. That idea of being paralyzed by perfection. And I actually talk
Oh
about how
God.
much of a struggle that is for academics because just what you said, we prepare so that we aren't in front of our, thesis
Yes.
committee or dissertation committee, and we don't want to be shamed. We don't want to like be
Yeah.
held behind.
Woo! Yes.
Our whole cohort moves on and we don't, like all these things. Like, I didn't make tenure, but everyone else I know did. And, all these things that, just make us be paralyzed by perfection. But the
100%.
reality is in business, 99% of what we do, we can always edit later. We can work on it later. Like I want my brain surgeon to be paralyzed by perfection. I want them to do that right. But in most of my work, it's fixable. And so I think that like that shift of going into a podcast and being like, hey, I'm just going to be curious, like just digging into a story and hearing about something. And maybe we talk in this one about the neuroscience of leadership and relationships like we thought, but like right this second, that's not where my interest is. And that's not where necessarily my audience is at. And so that idea of, moving on it, to see that shift in you, to me is so inspiring because, I got 2 articles in Harvard Business Review. And actually it's interesting the timing of this because in just a couple of weeks, the next episodes are with other HBR writers that are going to be all in a book that HBR is publishing and like going into airports and stuff that I'm in with some of these other people. But it's just, I love that, the framework of, getting an agent, getting your book proposal, shopping it around for 12 months. Like you just jumped that system. And obviously you put a ton of work into your actual scientific legitimacy. But that's just such an example of moving on it and just trying things and throwing spaghetti at the wall while still having that background. And so thank you so much for what you did and sharing that sometimes we overthink these things.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, this whole idea of like analysis paralysis and just how we can get so stuck in our thinking. The other thing I think is so extraordinary for people who are, thinking about mental health these days is I have watched the mental health conversation, depending on how you want to look at it, for 20 years or 40 years. So I am the daughter of a psychologist. So I really
Yeah,
grew up.
me too.
Oh,
I'm the son. I'm a son of a psychologist, not a
okay,
daughter,
so
but
right, so like I don't know what your which parent was a psychologist.
Yeah, so my dad was a school psychologist. He also had a private practice, a testing
Yeah. Okay,
practice,
so
and
it
then
was my father too.
my mom was a nurse practitioner, school nurse that taught sex ed.
So, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this, but I grew up like on his textbooks. We would have conversations all the time. And watching what happened, I think there's really two factors. With the pandemic is one of the factors, and then with obviously the wild expansion of technology, people are talking about things in the mental health domain like never before. Authenticity and attachment styles and empathy, I mean all of the things, right? So I think the world is so hungry for quality information on
Yes.
mental health and emotional power. And I think I believe this. I always say if I had a million lifetimes to live, I would live it on this altar of human pain and human power. And I feel it so much that people believe me. And yes, my scientific credentials are frankly very strong, but I also have like a real energetic passion for the work. And I think there's it's just such a sacred time to be a profession, like to be working in the well-being and mental health space and at this moment in time.
Yeah. I think people are really sick of the armchair experts, minus Dax Shepard. He does a good job with the Armchair Expert podcast. He actually brings in experts. But, the armchair experts that say, yeah, drink this celery juice and it'll cure this and do this. And it's just all people that have tried things that think that all of a sudden they're an expert in mental health. And I think there's a really strong craving for professionals. And when I look at the podcasters that I'm friends with, they are always looking for like, who are the scientists, who are the people that have the PhD or the master's degree, who are doing the clinical work. That if you're in that space, I mean, the podcasters we work with that, are doing that, it's amazing how much easier it is to rise in the ranks when you already know that stuff. Like, I mean, you or anyone, in your field could just spit out stats and research things, without doing probably much research at all, because you just are in that world all the time. So I totally echo what you're saying of people jumping in. I want to switch gears a little bit, and we can still kind of incorporate how you've used the neuroscience in your own life, but you speak frequently on leadership and relationships in regards to neuroscience and through your book Energy Rising. Will you just first give us like a big picture summary of what is Energy Rising about, and then I want to just dig into some of those topics.
Absolutely. So, energy rising is this idea of it's really about how do we meet our emotions to live our most powerful life. If you think about the most important questions in your life, okay? Did you have a good life? Were you a good person? Have you been successful? Do you need to do more with yourself? Should you stay in your marriage? Should you leave your marriage? Do you have enough money? Do you have enough time? I could go on and on and on. All of these questions are fundamentally mediated by emotion. The way to
Mm,
determine, was I a good person? Am I a good mother? Like, yeah, you can absolutely give facts. Of course, facts have a ton of utility. But at the core, it's how do I feel about it? Do I feel like it's enough? Do I feel like it was good? Do I feel like it was successful? So then, one of the things that I always say, the brain is the most extraordinary, complex machine on the planet. Okay, this is indisputable. At the same time, if I had one word to sort of describe all of my work, I would either say counterintuitive or I would say paradoxical. Those words kind of go together in my mind. Even though the brain is so extraordinary, I often call it the great simplifier. If we really run our lives through the filter of the brain, if we really work in harmony with the machine, things become so much clearer. And I say that clarity is the foundation of all power. So, what happens in our lives is we think all the time, oh my God, this problem on Tuesday is so big. And the thing this person said to me on Wednesday, and I don't know what's going to happen next month. And this thing, in other words, we waste all of this energy going situation after situation after situation after situation. But the reality of our lives is that our lives do not break down because our problems get too hard. Our lives break down only when our feelings get too big.
mm.
When we
Say
feel.
that again. So our
Uh-huh.
problem our we don't break down because the problems are too big, but because our feelings. Say
Yeah,
that
you
again.
don't break down because your problems get too hard. You break down because your feelings get too big. In other words, you get too frustrated. You get too despairing. You get too overwhelmed. You get
Mm.
you see what I'm saying? So it's never the
Yeah.
situation that brings us to our knees. It's the emotional energy. And when I
Oh my
talk a lot
gosh.
about energy in my work, and I'm not talking about this metaphorically or even metaphysically. I'm talking about it neurobiologically. The only reason I can do the fMRI and EEG research that I have done, for example, is because of the electrochemical properties of the brain. So we have got to figure out how to harness this emotional energy to live powerful lives. Otherwise, we're going to, and I'm sure I have done this in my own life. I think we all do. We keep thinking the situation is the problem. And so we find a new job or we find a new relationship or we find a new project. And the reality is like, if we could have just held our emotional position, it would have changed. I'll give you a great example. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. And I'm laughing because like I think, I certainly see myself in this. I'm sure a lot of us see ourselves in this. So I'll work with entrepreneurs and they'll have this brilliant idea and they'll have so much passion for it and they'll have given this years and years of thoughts. And they're finally ready to, for example, launch their product or launch their program. So it's like, well, how did it go? And I'm not kidding. They'll be like, it was a total failure. And I'm like, okay, well, tell me why. And they'll say, well, I'm making this up. I went on social media and I posted something about it and nobody liked it. Okay, so then tell me what happened. Well, I waited for 3 hours and then I took the whole thing down. It's like, wait a second. You had this brilliant idea, and because the world did not give you validation within like 3 hours or 2 days or whatever, what happened there really? Well, what happened was my own anxiety got so bad, I decided I couldn't endure it and then totally changed my behavior.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So if we're not able to stay with our emotionality, if we don't, and I talk about this idea of emotional expansiveness, well, then our relationships, our marriages, our parenting, our businesses are going to be hamstrung, not by what was actually possible for us, but by our rejection of emotional energy being produced in a nervous system that is literally designed to handle big feelings.
Hmm. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. Yeah, I remember during my uncoupling in 2021, really actively going after different ways that people think through kind of big pain and big change. And, we were living on the road and, lived for most of the pandemic in national parks. And then my daughter's mom decided to just stay in California and leave the family. And now I have 95% custody of the kids. And
Mm,
it was this crazy shift. Um, but I think, I mean, every morning it was like a 2-hour thing just to survive of meditation and working out and reading and journaling and all these things to basically like keep my emotions from just going crazy. Because I think the thing that I realized is humans are really good at predicting all the things that could go wrong, even if only one of those 100 things may be the thing that goes wrong. So, imagine you find a lump somewhere on your body. It's like right away it's cancer, and if it's cancer, then what's it going to be? And it's like we don't even have the information on what that lump is, but we're really good at going down these 100 different paths and doing what ifs and analysis, and but then that's causing all this additional stress and frustration, and 99 out of 100 of those things won't happen. And say the worst case scenario one does, you'll handle that as well. And so it's interesting to think about having less attachment to some of the outcomes, or and allowing those feelings and opportunities to unfold, and then just saying, I know that I have the skills to handle this, and if I don't have the skills, I'll learn those skills.
Absolutely. What you just said is so aligned with how the brain is actually wired. The best way, I talk a lot about the machinery of the brain. I actually think it's incredibly useful. It's like someone hands you a cell phone, you don't know what it is. How are you going to use it? Or someone hands you a car, you've never seen a car before. Like, how are you supposed to use it? So the brain is a machine. Well, what kind of machine is it? The brain is quite literally a pattern detection machine. Your brain is in the business of predicting futures. So you're going through your life going, apple, apple, apple. It's a new day. It's a new moment. It's a new person. It's a new job. The brain is going to predict apple. Okay. Well, of course, your brain's not actually going apple, apple, apple. What is your brain actually doing? Your brain is running on these emotional codes. If you think of the brain as like the supercomputer, it has all this coding. Emotion, this idea, it's the universal and primitive and most native language of every single human being on the planet. The idea of cognition as we understand cognition, and linear language as we understand, these are much later functions that really don't finish developing until our mid 20s, right? So this emotionality we're encoding, and you think about how the memory systems in the brain work, they're profoundly influenced by emotion. So what happens to all of us is we carry a core emotional code. We, I think, have a emotional code for power, and we have an emotional code for pain. Let's just talk about the pain ones now. Okay. So they're very simple. Again, they're very primitive. They're very black or white. And it's not that this is true in all cases. It's just when this code gets activated, this code does the thing this code does. So for example, and I'll give you some examples, and I'm sure we're all going to see ourselves in them. So, a core emotional pain code is I never get what I want. Things don't work out for me. Nobody listens to me. I'm no good. I'm bad. Right? So, it's like what happens is I can get into a new situation. Yeah, I'll tell you. I'll tell you. I think this story kind of really illustrates it. So, my kids are little. We like to watch the Polar Express. There's this great scene on the Polar Express where like these kids have made it. They are on the magical train going to meet Santa Claus. And there's one little boy who looks like he had in his past a lot of very difficult Christmases. So he's like 15 minutes away from like arrival in the North Pole, and he's sitting on the train talking to his two little friends, and he keeps saying in this really downtrodden sad voice, Christmas just never works out for me. Christmas just never works out for me. And his friend gets really exacerbated and is like, listen, I don't know if Christmas hadn't worked out for you, but right now we are pulling into the North Pole. That's, I think, this brilliant example that I try to like teach my little kids about, although they're like rolling their eyes at me, like, be quiet. This idea of like that core emotional code of Christmas doesn't work out for me. I can't get what I want. Things always get ruined. There's a whole new situation unfolding, but the brain is going to until we're aware of what the brain really does, and we work intelligently with the machinery, the brain is instinctively, reflexively, automatically going to superimpose these old codes over our new situations.
Yeah, I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I would love to just hear, for leaders and for people that want to like grow in their relationships, in that coding in the brain, like what can they do about that? Like what's the science showing us are some techniques or ways to think through our own leadership and our own relationships, from the neuroscience perspective?
Gosh, okay, so let me go.
In 3 minutes or less.
Okay, is that how long I have? Because I want to think about how I want to answer this. Do we have 3 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, we have probably 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay, let me say this. I will say I'm going to try to say 2 points here. So I think what's really powerful here is we have extraordinarily strong understandings of how to strengthen our physical body. So no one is confused about how to have a stronger physical system. Like, I got to go outside and walk. I got to go outside and run. I got to go to the gym and lift weights. Well, when I go to lift weights, if I've but maybe I don't want to go to the gym, that's fine, but I'm not confused about why I'm not getting stronger. Okay. That's the first point. The second point is when I do go to the gym and I lift, I meet my resistance. In other words, I lift more weight than I'm accustomed to lifting, my muscles will quite literally shake. They'll wobble, they'll shake, my heart will pound, my throat might constrict, I might sweat. That shaking is not a sign of danger. It is, in fact, I think a lot of us who work out regularly actually like it. We don't like the way it feels in that moment, but we understand it to be the clearest evidence of our increasing strength. In Energy Rising, and I think one of the really amazing things about Energy Rising, lots of very concrete exercises, lots of like case studies. It's like a very useful book if you're interested in learning more about how to work with your brain. So one exercise is I call hold your emotional shake. So what happens is we want to have a difficult conversation with somebody. We want to start a business. We want to show up online. And we literally start to shake. Our heart starts to race, our throat starts to constrict, our hands feel shaky, our voice might tremble. And instead of understanding that as we meet that resistance, we're very clear neuroscientifically that the brain gets tougher, it gets stronger when we meet resistance. We see that resistance, I think in part because we don't have a lot of good conversations like these, that shaking is actually a sign of your increasing strength.
Mm,
We've got to understand that we can build these hierarchies the same way you lift 5 pounds and then 10 pounds and then 15 pounds and then 17 pounds. We could say, for example, okay, let me think. Let's say I'm trying to work on, I want to strengthen my authenticity. Okay, that's the thing I want to work on. Well, I could make a hierarchy. Well, it feels authentic to wear an outfit that maybe people isn't really that customary. It feels authentic to hold the boundary. It feels authentic to start a newsletter. You see, and so what you're going to realize at each of these points is you're going to say like this feels like a 3 level of anxiety. This feels like a 5 level of anxiety. This feels like a 7. This feels like a 10. What we know is that the brain changes the most when we meet a moderate degree of resistance, when we meet a moderate degree of stress. If you put no stress on the system, the brain's not going to learn. If you totally flood the system, the brain's not going to learn. It's the same with the physical health, right? If I don't go to the gym at all, nothing happens. If I go try to run in an Ironman tomorrow, I'm going to destroy my system. What does a 7 feel like to me at the gym? So, to have these intelligent conversations about how to restructure the emotional system, I think is so life giving. And the piece that I think is wonderful here is when we do it in a reliable, consistent way, the changes are extraordinary and they happen quite quickly.
mm. So much to unpack there. I'm so glad you wrote a book that we can dig into. The last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that the best definition I can give for leadership is this: leadership is not the person who has the most experience or the highest title or makes the most money or has the most degrees. Leadership is the person who has the most potent emotional signal in the relationship. We see this very clearly in the parent child dynamic, right? Plenty of times I will work with parents who are brought to their knees. I don't just mean they're having a bad day, they are totally overwhelmed by the behavior of their 4-year old, their 6-year old, their 10-year old, their 13-year old, their 17-year old. In those dynamics, the leader in the dynamic is really the child because they're sending out the clearest emotional signal. If we want to lead people in our practices, in our homes, in our businesses, on social media, there's a really powerful conversation we have to have with ourselves, which is, what am I really feeling? And do I really mean it? If I get out there and I'm trying to lead people in a clinical practice to healing and to confidence and to courage and to boundaries and to accountability, we understand neuroscientifically that emotion is a thing of contagion. It does not matter so much the words that come out of our mouth. It matters the energy that is quite literally and physiologically in our bodies. So I think we get to have lives that feel so much more enjoyable, that are so much more successful when we actually become the emotional standard that we're trying to lead people to.
Mm. Well, Julia, thank you so much for being on the show. If people want to get energy rising or follow your work, where should we send them?
Yes, so you can get Energy Rising anywhere you buy your books. You could also get it from my website. That's drjuliadigangi.com. And I'm always love to connect with people who are interested in emotion, the brain, and relationships. So you can check out my social media. I do a lot of trainings and classes. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Julia DeGangi, LinkedIn at Dr. Julia DeGangi, and Facebook, I'm just Julia DeGangi.
Mm. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show and for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, Joe.
So much to unpack there. I feel like lately I've been having guests that, man, they just have so much to cover and we just can't cover it all. And I don't know, can you ever cover it all? I mean, that's really the real question. We've got some really cool series coming up. We have a couple Harvard Business Review authors coming up that are going to be in the same book as me. We have a couple episodes of that. And then on May 9th, we are kicking off our psychedelic assisted therapy series where I'm interviewing a bunch of different people on MDMA. We're talking about psilocybin assisted therapy retreats, ketamine groups, and ibogaine, and a bunch more. So make sure, if you're interested in that, just to educate yourself. If you're a part of that work, or if you're just interested in learning, come join us. That's going to be a large portion of May. And then episode 1000, that's going to be in early June. We're still planning out what that's going to look like. Also, we could not do this show without our sponsor support. Therapy Notes is the best electronic health records out there. They've been a supporter for years, but even more importantly, they can help you grow and scale your business with their EHR. They have embedded in their system their own virtual way, similar to Zoom, of doing HIPAA-compliant teletherapy. They'll help you move from your current billing platform over to Therapy Notes. They have amazing customer service. A lot of these EHRs only have, text support or chat, but you can actually talk to a real person that will help you out if you get stuck. A couple years ago, I remember I had a client that had switched over and the old company wasn't releasing the things, and Therapy Notes did such an amazing job of coordinating so that therapist could get back to doing therapy instead of worrying about her EHR. They're an amazing company. Head on over to therapynotes.com. Use promo code JOE, J-O-E, at checkout to get a couple months for free. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.